Okay, welcome to the late night version of the cyber lecture, Monday cyber lecture. Uh, Normally I record on Sunday, but various things happened that made things difficult. You may have noticed that last lecture I had a hole in my head with a bandage, which is now gone. So hopefully this will go better, even though it's almost midnight. This lecture will be uploaded as soon as I can. So early Tuesday morning, you should be able to access it. We have no quiz this Thursday, so no panic or anything. A lot of this stuff it's in the book, but not. I'm explaining it in a simpler way. It I think the way that I'm going to explain it today is more about ideas and concepts, rather than historical stuff, because we've talked a lot about history and we can't get away from that, because that's history is everything. It is human beings. It's your parents, your grandparents, your ancestors. Our world is created, everything from now to the dinosaurs, is history. So I know some of you don't like history and you feel like it's tough to remember names and it's tough to remember dates, but really for this class the ideas are key. I think you noticed on the midterm that there was very few dates. There was names, but there's very few dates, and you really just had to understand the significance, the meaning, or what effect something had, an event or anything. And a lot of the papers that were written this semester were very good. I was impressed. Not There was a few people that were a little bit close to using a little bit too much assistance, computer assistance, AI, or digital tools, but there was a lot of obviously original writing with grammar mistakes, but a good understanding of the material in the class. So I have not got the grades back from the multiple choice yet, but I'm hopeful that you all did well. So we'll see. I should have them. I should have the grades ready by Thursday. Now, there's a lot of stuff on this board. The first thing I did when I walked up here is I noticed, it's probably because it's late, I forgot to put the N on 7 years war. Let's just start with the timeline first, because we went all the way up to here, and then to talk about American culture, we had to go back, right? Because American culture, it originates from British culture. So you can't understand American culture properly unless you understand British culture, because essentially what the Americans were originally were angry British people, right? Just like the Civil War, which I should have included. Oh, I did. Good. The Civil War is the 1640s. A lot of the people who were dissatisfied, like what they ended up doing is going to America, right? One of the reasons that England and the British became the dominant North American power is because so many British people had no opportunity. There was too many people and not enough work. So you were unemployed, you were homeless, you were poor, you were a beggar or whatever. And excuse me, I might have to blow my nose in the middle of this lecture because of allergies. But basically, all of these people, the British mostly referred to them as vagrants. Okay, I don't have very much room on my board, but This a vagrant is just somebody in society who doesn't the people don't think contribute. Like I said, homeless, maybe a criminal, maybe a poor person, maybe a handicapped person. There's all kinds of people who have trouble getting jobs when the job market is tough, right? Even in Korea, even now, and in China and in Canada, people who are educated, people have good skills, people are smart, they're healthy, and they can't get a job. Back hundreds of years ago, the government and the king and the parliament didn't really understand that this is a matter of economic, this is an economic problem, not a personal problem. Is a lot of these people wanted jobs, but they couldn't get them. But it didn't matter, especially if you were a person who had skills and was relatively healthy and you didn't have a job. They thought you were being lazy. So nowadays we have unemployment insurance and we have social security and all these things. None of that existed. All right. So what are you going to do? You can't find a job, but you want one. You're a peasant, right? You're wearing basically the simplest shirt. You only have 3 shirts. You only have 1 pair of shoes. It's not like our society is incredibly rich compared to these societies. You look at Chosun 300 years ago. There's some rich people, but 99% of Chosun Koreans are poor. As even the rich people, we wouldn't call them rich now. They didn't have 10 supercars in their garage. So the point is that this is a class where we're using a textbook called Evolution and Revolution, right? And it's step by step these things happen. This is almost a revolution, but then they walk it back and they turn it into sort of a half democracy, half monarchy king situation, right? So that's fine in the United Kingdom, but what happens, especially during this period, the fighting with Spain and the fighting with France and the fighting with themselves and then the fighting with the Austrian Empire and the fighting with the Catholics, and it's just battle after battle after battle. This whole period is just the United Kingdom not having enough money or barely having enough money and fighting battles against other empires and other Europeans. Meanwhile, there's a whole bunch of people that are just moving to North America, right? In the end, there ends up being 13 colonies, but in the beginning, there's just one. The first one is when King James, our friend King James, the same one who we talked about, he made the Bible, and he was Scottish and he spent too much money and etc. Same guy. They named the colony Virginia because Queen Elizabeth was a virgin. She was the queen with no husband. So it was Virginia was the colony, and the name of the town, the river was the James River, and the town was the Jamestown, and the sort of area was Virginia, which now is a state. Now, Virginia was created by a company called the Virginia Company, but they ran out of money, and so the king took over the company, as governments do. When a company fails, but you think you want to save the company, the government takes it over or buys it or supports it or something. So that's what happened. The Virginia Company failed, mostly because they were looking for gold and they found dirt and trees and corn. So James and the government and the kingdom take it over, and then it starts to grow because they discover uh, that tobacco grows very well in Virginia, and then all of a sudden they have this expensive resource which they can grow, and then they can roll into cigars, and smoking becomes an expensive, luxurious habit in not only England, like across Europe. And so the Virginia tobacco is particularly good quality too. So everybody wants the Virginia tobacco. Ironically, King James hates tobacco, hates smoke, and thinks he writes sort of essay about how he doesn't want people smoking, except he needs money, and the tobacco trade is bringing in tons of money, so he can't. I mean, he could make it illegal, but he doesn't because he needs the money, which is, as you know, the story so far is the biggest problem with the English kings and queens is they never have enough money, so they have to do things that they don't want to do. So the first colony is Virginia, and Virginia is really, as much as possible, trying to be like England. Be like, hold on a second, please. As I was saying, Virginia's trying to, be like English, gentlemen. They got land. They grow things. They have servants. They dress up, and they bring English newspapers and everything. So this is how it starts. It's New England. It's Virginia, and there's New England, but step by step you get these different people coming. Remember the Puritans. The Puritans, they win the Civil War, but then after the Civil War, Cromwell dies, and then the king comes back, and the country becomes Anglican again, and the Puritans are not popular. So a whole bunch of Puritans go, and not long after Jamestown starts to grow and develop trade, Massachusetts, where Boston is, you may not know Massachusetts, it's the state, but the place where Harvard is, and MIT, and Boston, is founded by the Puritans. So Virginia is Anglican. Massachusetts and Boston are Puritan. Very different. Still Christian, but very different. In Pennsylvania, there is a man called William Penn, and he has his own version. He's a Quaker, which is sort of a passive, he's not a Puritan, he's not an Anglican, he's a Protestant, and he just believes in peace and brotherhood, and he begins the colony of Pennsylvania, of which Philadelphia becomes the most important city, and that's why Philadelphia is called the city of brotherly love. That goes right back to the 17th century when William Penn founded the colony. The reason that he got the colony is because the king, Charles II, after the Civil War, had no money. He borrowed a lot of money from William Penn's father, so he gave him land in America, and he said, "It's yours. Do what you want with it. You're the king of Pennsylvania." And he chose to make it a sort of really open-minded, brotherly, peaceful kind of colony. And that attracted a lot of people. Philadelphia soon became one of, the largest cities in North America. New York actually used to be was originally a Dutch colony. It was called New Amsterdam. After the Civil War again, there was a war. The Dutch lost. The Dutch lost, and they didn't really develop New Amsterdam except for as a trade place. So New Amsterdam had, many different languages, many different people trading things, very like New York is now, very, very diverse, very, very sort of cosmopolitan place, even at the beginning. And then the English took it over, and James II, who ended up, as running away from England and losing the crown to William. He was Catholic, but the Dutch are super not Catholic. So New York was named after the Duke of York, who became King James II, but he never really had control over it. So New York sort of developed organically, and there's lots of native people trading there. There was people from France, there was people from everywhere. The Dutch were great traders, and New York sort of kept that. New York's got a unique culture. The state of New York and the city of New York is different. There's various other sort of backstories to the 13 colonies. They all have sort of a different development, which is not really what the United Kingdom wanted. They're trying to build an empire, but actually they're focused on France and Scotland and Ireland and their own country so much that they just don't pay attention. So 100 years go by and all of these colonies are sort of doing whatever they want, and then which is this benign neglect idea where it's good to ignore them, because this creates this, I can go to America, I can go to a colony, I can be Catholic, I can be Protestant, I can be Presbyterian, I can be Scottish, I can be, the Scottish and the Irish especially, and Catholics get treated a little bit worse. But generally, you can be Jewish. Jewish people in Europe are treated badly for thousands of years, hundreds of years, thousands of years. They've been kicked out of England and then let back in. And then when they go, that's why there's so many Jewish people in New York, and there's so many Jewish people in general in America, is because they were allowed to go there and be Jewish. And in Europe, it was like national religion. But the 13 colonies sort of all had different religions. There's different people. Now, this is going to develop into a problem, because some of the people are going to be from Africa, and their ethnicity is going to be a mark of their slavery, of their it's going to be a sign that they are not proper members, right? Now, the native people, there's European people, there's Swedish people, there's lots of Germans. Northern European people especially are moving. There will be conflict between religion, mostly based between countries that are Catholic. So Italians, they don't really like Italians to come. They don't like the Spanish. That's because of wars and because of Catholic stuff. They certainly don't want the French, but after 1753, there's a province called New France, which becomes Lower Canada, which becomes Quebec. And suddenly you've got tens of thousands of French citizens in your colonies too. When they decided to start a war and declare independence, they did invite, the French and the English Canadians, to fight with them, but they were not interested. So it wasn't, there's people from different countries, they look different, the political systems are different, especially different than the imperial system. That's part of the problem. They don't want to listen to a king that lives on the other side of the ocean. They don't want an emperor. They want governors of their own colonies. The economic systems are all different. It's a huge, just like different countries have different economies. The colonies were, the colonies were geographically different. They had different resources. They had, different climates. They have different weather. They had different resources. Some of them were, had better access to water, and some of them were farther north, and some of them, could trade easier with, the south, or had stronger connections with different countries. It really was developing on its own for about 100 years. And then suddenly, this global war with France made the British realize that they didn't really have control of their colonies, that their colonies were too free, and that they weren't paying enough money. In fact, the colonies were getting, the population was increasing, and they had the opposite problem. One of the reasons that slavery started to become more common than like paid labor is because there was just so much work and so much land and not enough people. And in England, it was the opposite. There's too many people, so it drives the price of labor down. But labor in America was expensive, just like in the Black Death, because there wasn't enough people, right? If you have a lot of people, you don't have to pay them very much. Just like the Black Death killed half the people, so everybody else gets paid more. But in America, in the colonies, there wasn't enough people. So, they said, well, pay me more if you want me to work, because you don't have anybody else to do it. So one of the solutions to that was to import as many people to get, and they just, colonization couldn't keep up with it, and slavery was an expensive thing, very expensive prospect at the beginning. But once the trade developed, the price started to decrease, and they made terrible rules, like you were a slave forever. Like, you didn't normally, in there's different types of slavery, and we'll talk about this later, but normally, like, you have a chance to be if you're a slave, you can work for 10 years, and then even if you're a prisoner or a criminal, you work for 7 years or 10 years, and then they let you go. But American slavery was permanent. And if you had children, your children were slaves too. Like, you were born not having done anything wrong, but automatically becoming a slave, which is a horrible, racialized, sort of inhumane crime, criminal exploitation of a group of people. It's one of the worst. It's one of the worst things, if not the worst thing that American culture has ever done. Well, we'll put it up there as the top 1 or 2 things that they've ever done. So economic systems were starting to develop around, like, you can't grow tobacco in Massachusetts. You have to grow something else. You have to grow wheat, or you have to catch animals and sell their fur, or you have to grow wheat, or you have to use water mills, or build ships, or hunt whales, whatever the case may be. In the South, you can grow indigo. Georgia and South Carolina, you can grow cotton. Cotton became massive, the biggest moneymaker of the early colonies, and early America was cotton. cotton plantations. Far enough south there in Georgia, even sugar, indigo, like I said, dye for things. You could grow rice. None of that. Those are completely different. They require different labor. They're agricultural based. It's much different than living up in New York City and making tools, or being in Pennsylvania, or making things out of metal, mining, coal mining, getting resources, all those kind of things. So, as a consequence, each society was very different. Some of them were all sort of, to a greater or lesser extent. Some of them didn't have very many slaves, but like slavery was a part of the society, and servants were part of a society who weren't getting paid. But then, as soon as the America was created, half the states made slavery illegal, and the other half insisted that it was essential. So we're going to talk about that later. But benign neglect, don't forget about that. One of the results of this, you guys do what you're doing. One of the reasons is it's expensive, to manage a colony far away, so they don't want to pay money. So the government was happy to send all these people that they didn't know what to do with, all the way over to America. And to be honest, 100 years later, they were shocked that all these criminals, these poor people, these lazy people, turned into productive, functional, intelligent leaders, writers, farmers, builders, tradesmen and metal workers. All these people that they rejected from their society, they were as successful as any other British citizen. It was a remarkable result. It just really made the point clear that they had not understood that their economy didn't support the number of people they had, and they just needed a chance, And once they were in America, some of them became very rich, very successful, and they're still British, but many of them were sort of considered the bottom of society. And once they achieved, that success and education, and started to establish universities and schools and churches and build all these things, they believed that they were not lesser people than the British were. And that was the real, I think, essential issue, is that you have to recognize that British Americans are not lesser people than British citizens living in the home country. But the British were unwilling. They were unwilling to accommodate their political and social demands, which resulted in the war. So this sort of benign neglect for 100 years, low taxes, diverse development, little government control. Then at the end of the 70 Years' War, okay, we're going to tax you, we're going to send government people over there, we're going to send soldiers, and you guys are going to pay for it. It was 5 or 6 generations of people were like, no, we're if we're going to be a real part of the empire, then you let us send people like Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Jefferson to England to tell you what we want and how we want to manage our colonies. If you don't, then we're going to resist. And that sets the stage for Thursday, where I'm going to talk to you about the American Revolutionary War, because that's what it comes to. The British are stubborn, and the British Americans insist, and no deal is made. So it escalates from grumbling, complaining, protesting, violence to war. And that's the introduction to the American Revolutionary War, which we will look at in the textbook. Thank you for this late night session, and I'll get this uploaded and linked as soon as I can. Have a good night.